this panel. Originally, I wasn't really sure how sex work fit into the LGBT sort of moralized asylum seekers, but of course, we're all sort of dealing with sexual minorities, and so thanks. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. So the title of my presentation is Keep Your Hands Off My Body. And this is all based on research that I conducted as part of my master's report. And the backdrop to all of these slides, you'll see our pictures. I'll speak a little bit more about my research, but what I did was conducted a participatory photo project. And while I won't engage in the actual images, the exhibition is up in the exhibition hall, and it's quite impressive, so take some time to go and check it out. So really quick, what I'll do is I'll briefly introduce the research study. I'll explore the social and legal context of sex work, engage with public health and human rights arguments on the decriminalization of sex work, and introduce a way forward. So the title of the exhibition was Working the City Experiences of Migrant Women in Inner City Joburg. And as mentioned before, the study explored the impacts of urban space on self-representation. The participants were 11 migrant women, 6 internal and 5 cross-border. The cross-border migrants were from Zimbabwe, and currently in South Africa, Zimbabwean migrants are not considered refugees or classified as refugees. But nonetheless, they're migrants. And the methodologies that were used primarily for the research study was a 10-day participatory photo project that worked in collaboration with Market Photo Workshop, Sisonke Sex Worker Movement, and the African Center for Migration and Society. Journals were given to the 11 ladies at the beginning of the workshop, and the ladies were asked to write thoughts, feelings, life stories as they saw fit throughout, and also to write captions that accompanied the photo project. Again, I won't go into the photo project too much, except to just tell you that the images that were selected for the final exhibition were actually chosen by the ladies, and each lady had a poster, each participant had a poster that, and a sort of summary story that they wanted to share with the public, and captions that went along with the images. So because I was interested in representation, what became really interesting with the use of the journals was that you saw a clear agency and either dilution or complete change of stories as the days came closer to final selection of images and exhibition, and that the public was now going to engage in their work. And for myself, that was really, really interesting. I also conducted narrative interviews with 5 ladies and did ethnography. So part of this research is on the backdrop that there isn't much research on sex workers, and there isn't much research on sex workers in South Africa. As you see from this country fact sheet from the UNAIDS website, there isn't any data available for female sex workers. A lot of the research that's been done is men having sex with men. However, female sex workers is it's lacking in research. So let me just quickly lay out the scene. Sex work in South Africa is a human rights and public health issue. Currently, all forms of sex work are illegal. That includes the sex worker, the client, and any third party, so like a brothel owner. And the criminalization of sex work obviously has dramatic impacts on the risk of contracting HIV for sex worker, the client, and therefore society as a whole. And the criminalization violates the basic rights of sex workers. So I'm just going to continue laying out the scene. Johannesburg is a city of nearly 4 million with a growth since 2001 of about 20%. Average growth per year is 4%. And it's estimated that the city will reach 5.2 million by 2015. It's often referred to as the city of migrants. Rural to urban, internal migrants, and cross-border migrants, so people moving from other countries. About 25% is estimated to live informally, and in this, most migrants, or many migrants in inner city Joburg, engage in informal livelihood strategies, and sex work being one of them. However, it is illegal. So I'm just going to briefly speak about some of the social aspects and health aspects of sex workers and migrant women sex workers. Migrant experiences of health access and care points to concerns relating to xenophobic attitudes towards foreigners. Then when you add sex work to that, it becomes even more limited. And this is partly due to fears and experiences of discrimination and fears of experiences of disclosing your sex work profession. So, because sex workers have generally been overlooked in South Africa, research on HIV and AIDS is limited. But what we do know is that, in a recent study conducted in 1998, is that prevalence rates were somewhere between 45 and 65%. And it's likely that these rates are actually much higher now. This is a great quote from one of the participants that highlights issues of migration and health. And she says, "One time I went to one of the public health clinics in Johannesburg. Before there was the Asylum sex worker clinic, getting medical help was very hard. One day I went to a clinic, and when the nurse found out that I was a sex worker, she slapped me. And she told me that she didn't want to treat me because I was Zimbabwean, and there is not enough money to take care of us. And then when she knows that I am a sex worker, she doesn't think that I am worth saving or taking care of. She makes me feel so bad that I never go to the doctor again. Until the sex worker clinic opened, I just took care of myself with traditional healers and/or I buy medication at the pharmacy." Police violence is another significant human rights abuse that many sex workers face and migrants. Studies have shown that extremely high levels of violence against sex workers, complaints about rape, extortion, demands for sex or money as bribes, and even death. And all of the women in this study reported at least weekly negative encounters with the police. And sex workers often don't file police reports for fear of further abuse, and in the case of migrants, for fear of deportation as well. So it's quite grim. Here's another really great quote by Letty that says, "The police will arrest us, and if we don't have money, they force us to have sex with them. One time they took me to jail and 5 police officers took turns raping me. They would shout at me telling me that because I was Zimbabwean and a sex worker, that I didn't deserve better treatment." So what are the effects that criminalization of sex work has on migrant sex workers? Obviously there's an increase of stigma in the profession. There's a limited access to legal and social services. There's an increase in exploitation and abuse of sex workers by clients, partners, brothel owners, and police. Migrant sex workers often have no choice but to live in dangerous, squalid conditions, and these conditions attract social and criminal ills, and may force sex workers to relocate, often resulting in social disintegration, which all collectively point to an increased risk of contracting HIV. So it is clear that the use of the criminal law increases the vulnerability of an already vulnerable group, so migrant women, and migrant women who sell sex. And these laws perpetuate the human rights abuses. There is a more recent history about the attempt to decriminalize sex work in South Africa, and you see here in 1997 the ANC supported a Gauteng initiative to decriminalize sex work. The ANC agreed, however, was the following year it quietly shelved the plan to decriminalize sex work for fear of backlash from conservatives. In 2001, the Minister of Health also identified a connection between criminal prohibition and sex worker vulnerability, and officially committed the Department of Health to the law reform process. Then again in 2008, the Parliament called for decriminalization of sex work. However, up until now, no changes have been made to decriminalize sex work in South Africa. Religious and traditional groups are in serious opposition. This is one of my favorite quotes, and it's this woman that was speaking about sort of criminalization, health, human rights abuses, and it's all here. And she says, "Sometimes those big men at the top think that we are not worthy of protection. If I could sit down and talk to them, I would tell them that while I am here busy working to feed my children and support my family, they are out there abusing us. The government, those big men with their fancy suits, think that they know everything. They think that they know what is right and what is wrong. Meanwhile, they rape and abuse us. We can't go to any doctor because they will refuse us service. They will always find a reason not to treat us or to protect us. It's either because we are migrants or it is because we are sex workers. They need to think about what they are doing and realize that we aren't going anywhere. We don't need saving, we need protection. We need the law to give us the freedom to do what we want with our bodies. So a quick summary of the issues. Obviously, human rights violations of sex workers are compounded by a law that criminalizes sex work and strengthens the hands of dishonorable members of the police force. And many migrant sex workers face increased vulnerabilities due to South African xenophobic sentiments. The way forward? Oh, I don't think you can see that very well. To increase robust research on migrant women sex workers in the region. This will assist policymakers and the public to distinguish fact from fiction and fact from emotion. Assist with evidence-based planning and programming. And finally, to decriminalize sex work. Despite increased efforts and research to curb the sex work industry, sex work persists and increased police efforts have achieved little except to increase the negative life experiences of migrant sex workers. Police action does not alter demand or supply for sex work, it only makes a vulnerable group of women more vulnerable. The current legal framework renders sex workers vulnerable and should be reformed. This is one of my favorite pictures taken by one of the participants. And it states, sex workers demand rights, not rescue. So, and you can see here, this is the end, thank you, but how these experiences can overlap with the LGBT concerns regarding legitimacy and protection. And so, thank you for your time, and I look forward to any questions that you might have.